Emmanuel, 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 God is with us. I speak to you in the name of God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Please be seated. I know some of you, and that makes this harder, to be perfectly honest. And I emailed Father Bill last night, and I said that I was nervous, which honestly, I get nervous every time I give a sermon because I'm always trying to honor God and do and say what it is that God wants me to do. But I'm going to talk about a very personal story. It is not, and I wrote this somewhere in here, and I'm using a script because I think it will be easier for me. This is not prescriptive. This is descriptive. It is a personal story. While many other people were involved in this story, I can only really talk about my part in this story. And when I was asked to speak at this healing service, however many months ago, I always look at my calendar first and kind of make a decision. And I looked at my calendar, and on my calendar it says Christian's body was found. And I thought, okay, I think I'm supposed to talk at the healing service. So the other thing is, I don't want you to feel sorry. I have to be able to tell this story, but honestly, I need no sympathy. And I want to tell you guys, I'm sorry that you're here today, because you're hearing a lot of stories about young men that had challenges and if for some reason you guys need to, if I'm not going to get into any, difficult things, but if for some reason this is tough on you, perfectly fine to go outside and smell the flowers. And I would say that to anybody, but I want to make sure that you hear that especially because it's a story about a young man who was my son. So one of the greatest things I ever heard in my life was very simple phrase, grief is love with no place to go. So simple, so good. And I, saw it on Facebook or something. And I thought, yeah, that's it. Because it gets stuck in you then when you've lost somebody and you can't just stop loving someone. So on this exact day, 8 years ago, probably at just about this exact time, I got a phone call that provided me with a great sense of relief. My son's body had been found. After falling into a gorge while hiking on a beautiful day in February, his body had surfaced in the Hudson River, and it had been located. Now, how can anyone feel relief about that? Well, after he'd been missing, I understood what people experience when a child, particularly, in his case he was 25, is not located. You can know something in your heart, but without proof, a little part of you holds on to the question, what if? And where? I had someone, and this man is no longer with us, but he sent me the loveliest note. He's like, maybe he's living on a commune in Vermont. And I was like, that would be great, So somewhere in the back of my mind was that little letter saying, maybe he's on a commune in Vermont. It doesn't sound like him. So I'm not telling this story for pity or sympathy. I'm telling this story because the process of healing from this loss is complex and continual. It would be great if I could be a good Christian person and stand in front of you and tell you, this is just hard. It's so much worse than that. Losing a child is like a primal scream that never stops in your soul. This isn't one of those platitudes about God not giving you more than you can handle. Garbage! Or having someone tell you that right now your child is in a better place, or they have their wings, or they're in a choir, or something. Those are awful things to say to a grieving person. They're comforting for us because they make us feel a little better about things, but I found myself needing to correct people and say, actually, we don't become angels. Just so you know, I happen to have the facts from the Bible. We don't actually get to become angels and we don't get wings. But no, that's okay. You picture him with wings. That's fine. My son Christian was in the best possible place when he was with us. That's where he really belonged. So when people said, oh, no, he's in a better place, actually, I disagree. He was in a very fine place when he was in my life. He was strong, he was handsome, he was smart, he was so funny. He was not at all perfect, so please, whatever we do, we don't take people and start throwing them up on pedestals. He was not that kind of person either, but he was growing into such a lovely young man who always cared to ask how I was doing before telling me about how he was doing. A young man who would, and I used to love this, happily wrap his arm around my shoulders when we walked anywhere because he was just happy to be with me. And it was both protective and comforting because he was about 6'3". In any case, on this day, 8 years ago, I got the call. I was at a diocesan event at Messiah Church in Glens Falls, and I was too far away to be at the river when they retrieved his body, which is my only regret. Because as a mother, I felt that I needed to be on every piece of this journey And I was at every single one, including the morgue and everywhere else, but I couldn't get to that river because, of course, the media was there and they were reporting on it. TV stations, newspaper articles all carried the news, and it is unbelievably amazing that you're here, Cheryl, because I refer to you. Without knowing you would be here today. I said, having been a news story added additional layers of complexity and complication, and I actually had to consult a PR expert who is right here, it's actually what her job is, to help my family deal with the media appropriately. And this is when we had found him, this is when the grieving really began. For us as a family, we had been through shock and disbelief, but now we settled into the reality of planning a funeral, which was profoundly healing on its own, believe it or not. And so I would encourage those of you who have family members who say, no, you don't need to do anything, you don't need to have, just like, once I die, it doesn't matter. Gosh darn it, that service matters. And it matters for the living. It matters for the living, and it mattered to us. So to work together, and we are, Christian's dad and I are divorced, and then his brother, who was his best friend, the fact that we got to work together intentionally to honor someone we love so much was a very powerful way to do something. And that's one lesson about grief. And not everybody's grief, but my grief. We want to do something for the person to help remember them. Doing nothing felt empty. Doing something felt better. So our first job was to plan this funeral. Our gospel reading today comes from that funeral. And our little family, our little dysfunctional family, did a great job. Every song, every hymn, every prayer, every reading had meaning for us, and we were able to agree about everything. That was profoundly healing. So many families have conflicts and become angry at the loss of a loved one, but we pulled together, and I remain grateful for that. While we had suffered through divorce, we managed to be on the same page with our grief. So having chosen the gospel today from Christian's funeral service, I looked over all the readings, and they were all so good. So that's why I emailed Father Bill. I'm like, do I have to choose all the readings? So I was like, I'll just take them all and put them in the service. He's like, no, really, just the gospel. But I looked at them again, and I have them with me today. We did a good job. So it was nice to relook at that because I had to open up his funeral program again in order to look at all these things. But grief is like a caged animal, and it ravages the heart, the soul, and the spirit. After having dealt with his funeral and being so grateful for that gathering, I became chronically exhausted. And I'm telling you some of these things so that you might not be surprised in your own life at the different things that can happen at the loss of someone you love. I never stopped working at church, and there was good reason. Please, it's not because I'm an overachiever, and it's not because I was hiding my grief. That wasn't it. I didn't stop working or serving at church because I was aware that people in the parish were on this journey with me. And if I wasn't there, there would have been a void that they would have filled with stories and their own ideas about what was happening. And so I made the decision to walk the journey immediately with all of them. But the tiredness that I experienced was constant. No one told me that grief could cause exhaustion. Now you hear about, okay, you're going to want to eat too much, you're not going to want to eat enough, I wasn't aware that I would wake up tired every day. My hair fell out. Who knew? Like, these are things, like, nobody tells you, which is an awful thing for a woman to have to deal with, honestly. I didn't know that your hair got sad, that your hair suffered. My body was responding to traumatic change in a way my heart could not. My body could rebel and fight and even give up, but my spirit did not. So let me interject here once again. It's not a prescriptive talk. This is not a cure for grief. This isn't a step-by-step recovery. This isn't a miracle talk at all, in my opinion. This is a stumbling, falling, grabbing, gritty way of coping with my own grief, and if it helps, I'm glad. But mostly it is just the journey. But even with all of this, the unthinkable, impossible, those were the two words that every morning I woke up and I would say, but this is unthinkable and impossible. And I remember saying those words every single morning, that someone who was so beloved could just disappear. Even in the middle of that, I was blessed. Even as my whole self felt like crumbled up saltine crackers on a regular basis, I experienced joy almost immediately. And it was only possible because I have this relationship with God that has seen me through, that I have taught about, stood upon, studied, chosen, and been chosen by. I am grateful that I did not have to look for God the way we had to look for my son, that God was simply present. I am grateful that I didn't have to question this unquestionable love that God showed me because it was simply there. It was like gravity. You may not know it's really there until you jump out of a plane. And this was kind of like jumping out of a plane. Because of God, I was able to sleep at night. I mean, I never worried about sleeping, actually, because of that exhaustion thing. Because of God, I felt completely understood. After all, hadn't God lost a son as well? And at a relatively young age. Because of God, I knew that the only place my son could safely be other than with me was with God. And I had received certainty during the night of unknowing, when we had known he was missing, and that was Shrove Tuesday, and the day that we kind of realized was Ash Wednesday, so the timing was kind of challenging in terms of church stuff. But it was because of this faith in our shepherd that Maureen read about that I could stand at the edge of a gorge, literally and metaphorically, where dozens of people were searching for my son's body. And I immediately felt this incredible sense of joy. It was unbelievable. Like, I literally was almost like standing outside myself going, excuse me, how is this possible? I looked down and they were looking for someone else's son, someone else's brother, someone that they had known who had done a dangerous thing. Kind of like hanging on a car in a parking lot. I hate to say it. So it's been a week that Cheryl's been sharing Ethan's story with me, and I'm like, oh, it's so hard. Who knew that there were people who would help like this? How blessed we were to have their expertise. It was because of this faith and this joy that I was able to give a children's sermon on the very first Sunday of Lent, which was only 4 days later, to talk to the children honestly about the loss of someone so beloved. And what I said to them was what I've said to you. Well, I loved Christian with my whole self. God loves him 1,000,000,000,000,000,000 times more, and even more than that. So while I was sad, I explained to them, I was also very comforted that he was with God. And I would not have known the strength of this faith if it had not become a habit in my soul. In other words, what I said to my parish as well on that first Sunday after I'd talked to the children, I said, you know, I've preached for decades about this solid rock, this foundation of faith is upholding us in the midst of storms. We've all sung those songs, right? No, we don't call against the rain, we dance in it, and we know all that, and that's true. But I can tell you with wonder and gratitude that actually we can. At least what I could say on that day was that I could stand up and I could speak and I could witness to a power so much greater than my own and to a love so much greater than my own and to a shepherd that I continue to follow to this day. That it was sustaining me as a life force, giving me words and purpose and hope despite such terrible loss. So I always want to temper this because it may sound all Christian-y. And that worries me because Christians get a really bad reputation for being sort of fake happy about things or telling people, you should be grateful, you know, your child is with God. And I'm still not, just so we're all clear. I mean, yes, of course I am, but I'm not. I have things to say to him. We have stories to share. We have stuff we got to do. So when I said yes to speaking here today, almost immediately, these weird phrases came to me that I'd never heard before. And I'm also not big on like the vision word. I just want to tell you, because it doesn't always happen for me. So I just want to be careful with it. But this is what came to me to understand my own process of ongoing grief, even 8 years later. Sometimes I can't heal. I can just deal. And we need permission for that. And particularly when we're with people who are such prayer warriors. Sometimes I've never forgotten, and I apologize for this, but I've never forgotten being at a healing service and somebody prayed for their shoulder pain and immediately the person said, how do you feel? And I thought, well, they're going to say they feel better, I think, because like this is pressure. But the reality is if the shoulder pain comes back next week, they're going to feel bad, like they did something wrong, like the prayer wasn't good enough or that they didn't believe enough. That's bad news in my opinion. So sometimes we can't heal. We can just deal on the path of healing, and that's okay. That's okay. Sometimes I can't thrive. I can just survive. And I still have those days. So I want to make sure that when we talk about the kinds of challenges we face as humans who are also Christians, that we understand that this process isn't perfect and isn't lockstep. So I think these words are God's gift to me once again as I continue to navigate this challenging pathway, but perhaps they were also meant as God's gift to you. So I want us to remember them, not to feel guilty when all the sadness and the anger, because here's the deal. I was furious at my son, and I still am. How dare you do something so dangerous? How dare you do something that took you away from us, that stole you? You know? So people said to me immediately, don't be angry at him. I was like, I'm just not going to tell you then, okay? But I'm still going to be angry because when we love people, we want them to do the things that keep them with us. That's so important to us. I mean, when somebody's late for dinner, we're mad at them, for heaven's sakes. This kind of counts as more than late for dinner, in my opinion, okay? So I realize that is my anger at being completely out of control, of not being able to save someone I love so much still. I want us to remember these words about dealing and surviving instead of healing and thriving, because healing does not healing does not mean you're a bad Christian. It doesn't mean you're unfaithful. It means you're human, and that healing isn't the destination, it's the process. I assume that I will not completely heal until I see my son again. And I'm so sure of that, so standing on that solid ground, that I'm going to tell you one more story that I really try not to tell. That is a confirmation of faith and a confirmation of things to come, because I tell people I'm not really a vision girl. Stuff doesn't happen for me that way, but a while after his death, and I don't know exactly when this was, I can picture the situation but not the exact date, I was at a yoga class. And I used to go to yoga, and I would say to the yoga teacher, hi, I'm just going to cry through the whole yoga class. She's like, oh, me too. This is great. Let's cry together. Because she had lost her brother X number of years ago. And somehow the connection for me of body and spirit is very powerful. So we're doing that final pose, which is, I forget, Shavasana. It's called the corpse pose. And you just lay there as motionless as you can, and you try to let go of yourself completely. You empty your whole self. And for me, that's very healing. Yoga is very close to God for me. So I know there's a whole yoga thing going on in the Christian circles and all too, but I don't buy into it. I just happen to love yoga, and God shows up every time. So anyhow, I emptied my whole self, and I'm crying. Little tears are coming down the side of my face. And I started to go on this journey while I was lying there. And I hadn't chosen it, and I decided to keep going. And I was in a place full of people on this journey. All of a sudden, I was in this place full of people, and I was searching for Christian, my son. I became aware that I was in some version of a holy city that I did not recognize. But everyone was facing in a single direction away from me as I searched for Christian. And then I found him. My tall, gangly, beautiful son. He was right there in the middle of the crowd, looking in the same direction as everyone else. And as I got close, this is the only part I'm going to try really hard not to cry, because it makes me cry every time. No crying. Because I don't want this to be a pity party. I really don't. But as I got close, he turned towards me, and his eyes lit up, and he said, Mom. With everything that he had ever said it with before. He was so full of love, so happy to see me, and he reached his big old grasshopper arms down around me, and he held on to me for just a minute, and I was like, oh, I found him. And then he let go, and he turned back toward the light. And I realized as I stood there that everyone was facing the light, but I couldn't see it. I didn't belong there, but he did. And he was fully embracing the presence of God in all its glory. Glory that has been veiled to me at this time, but glory I yearn for, hope for, pray for, preach for, run towards with every cell of my being. When we came out of the yoga pose, I had difficulty connecting with the world. It took me about 3 hours. I think when I walked home, I was literally doing this, Pavement didn't make sense. Breathing didn't make sense. And the walk home was only a block, but it felt like a mile of wandering because I was so connected to this other place. The consolation I continue to receive from that is incredible, but it does not fill the gap of his absence. And I want to be clear about that. While it was a great gift and I receive it as such, it's still not him. And I would love to see him. It doesn't make me yearn less for him here and now, but it does settle my heart. My grief is my own. My faith is found in community and worship and relationship. My God has been, is, and will be faithful in ways I cannot even begin to express. But some days I'm still just dealing. I'm not healing. Some days I'm just surviving. I'm not thriving. And I'm confident that when these days and hours arrive, I can follow the voice of my shepherd, who showed us just this week how he has conquered the thing in the world that most of us fear the most. Christ is risen, my friends. And so will we too, as my son has, as all of us will. Amen.